Hello again, Dan Alasso here with a short note for the lifelong learners. As I'm revising my handbook, what used to be called How to Make Notes and Write, but is now going to be called How to Read, Research, Make Notes and Write. Following that new title, I'm going to add a How to Read section to what had been the highlighting chapter. I'll probably even replace the focus on highlighting with one on kind of active reading and make highlighting a subset of that. And in doing this, I'm actually going to use and describe and adapt and comment on the most popular and influential book on that topic, Mortimer Adler's How to Read a Book, which he published in 1940 and then reissued in a slightly expanded form with Charles Van Doren in 1972. So I reread the Adler book a couple of years ago with my book club, and I made a bunch of highlights at the time, which then became notes, partly for the book club discussion and partly just for my own purposes. And then I worked those up into a series of short reviews of each of the first 10 chapters of the book. Beyond that, they go chapter by chapter through the different types of books that are out there and how to adapt the process to those particular needs. And then I published these little reviews on Substack, and I've recently transferred them to my new web vault. So I've been rereading these little chapter reviews as a way of kind of gathering my thoughts for an explanation of Adler and Van Doren's advice in my new handbook chapter. This process involves reading the HTML versions of these pages in my new web vault and then highlighting and annotating them to identify the points that I want to be sure to make about this process. In a couple of cases, I found sentences, or in one case even a whole paragraph that I had written previously that I think I can easily adapt to this new purpose. I have a private little research folder in Hypothesis that I use for these types of things sometimes. Although I do like to do most of my hypothesis annotation in public so that other people can see what I'm doing and maybe even comment on it, I do find it a little embarrassing highlighting my own writing in public. And when I've completed my little review of each of these 10 essays, I'll take all of these highlights and comments that I've made and paste them into a new draft document where I can arrange them all and edit them and expand on them. I'll probably include a little narrative, this thing here, about how I did this, along with the description of how to read that I'm introducing to my readers. I don't want this to get too meta or circular, but I do think it's a useful example of me actually doing the process that I'm advising people to adopt in the book. So I think it'll be useful. Maybe not the part where I use Hypothesis to annotate my own content. That seems a little bit specific to my case. But I think people can easily substitute other ways of pulling together the useful parts of their notes from either a digital or an analog system and then pour them into a new document that they can use to craft those ideas into new output. That's really the whole point of the Zettelkasten project, after all. Think about this. Maybe I'll place this story later in the handbook after I've described all of those steps in greater detail. It might be a fun callback to this earlier part of the handbook, where I describe what Adler and Van Doren had said about reading. In any case, that's what I'm working on this morning. So I hope you found that a little bit interesting. Thanks very much for watching. I will see you again very soon.